Hello everyone and welcome to possibly the first in a long series of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite update videos I am planning on doing. I know I recently uploaded today a theme mock-up for Edward Falcon, and I'm going to keep doing those because I really like speculating on characters for these games, but lo and behold, actual sort of news came out in the form of a message from the guy named Ryce, who initially leaked Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. And basically, he hinted before that there was a character coming with very, very interesting animations, but he didn't give much away for it. However, today, he actually said that, that there is a character from one of his favorite series, keeping it secret, that has a very interesting animations, very elaborate animations, and that they are a villain. So that is the information that we got from him. From his favorite series, one of his favorite series, there is a villain coming with elaborate animations. Now remember, this is the guy who actually leaked Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite before it came out, so of course, he does have credibility, at least some. Maybe he just got very lucky. However, I decided to take a look at some of the villains that could potentially fall under this category. Now, for the most part, there's one series that it's going to heavily skew towards, and we're going to save that series for the end because there'll be a lot to individually talk about for now. But you might have noticed that, like, for Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, there weren't many Capcom villains. There was only 4. Unless you know, sort of think in weird, broad terms, like Akuma kind of is and could arguably be one, and the Red Reamer could, Firebrand rather, could potentially be not, but regardless, if this is a new villain, let's take a look at who it might be, the reasons why I would say they would have elaborate animations, or be an interesting villain from a good series, and like the plausibility of them. So, to start things off, of course, it's Capcom. We're going to start with Street Fighter, and for this choice, I'm going to pick Necalli. Now, you might be thinking, Necalli isn't that crazy. Like, you know, you look at him in Street Fighter, and he's just kind of like big animalistic dude. Not that crazy. However, in the story mode for Street Fighter V, it really goes into showing how he's like a mud man, and like can turn into mud and shapeshift and eat people, and do crazy stuff in the story that he can't actually do in the game itself. And I feel like it's very, very possible for a Marvel-style Necalli to have insane animations. Plus, of course, they put in, what's his name into Marvel vs. Capcom, or her name, Viper, into Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and they put in, you know, Charlie into Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 1. So I do believe that there is a, you know, they do want to push their newest Street Fighter, and Necalli would be a smart choice for it, with some potentially pretty crazy animations. After that, the other series that we know is going to get a bunch of love, that's Resident Evil. There are a lot of villains for Resident Evil who could have very elaborate animations. For instance, you could almost argue that Nemesis from Marvel 3 had very, very intense animations, and he is definitely a villain. But if this is obviously going to be a new character, as they're talking about, the one that kind of jumped out to me was Krauser from Resident Evil 4. And the reason is because he's not just a big, scary monster, and he's not just, you know, cool, collected Albert Wesker. No, he's kind of a mixture between the monster and the man, with his weird mutated arm, but he's still like all combat-y and stuff. So I do think that Krauser could potentially be who it is, but at the same time, just from the wording, I'm not sure. But if it was someone from Resident Evil, I'd put Krauser as my pick. But the one problem that arises, and this arises with a couple Capcom villains, is of course this is a franchise that is crossing over with Marvel, which as of now is being relatively kid-friendly. I say relatively because obviously, like, if Nemesis can get into 3, then of course there's room for other mutaty gross stuff. But at the same time, it'd be interesting to see to what level of allowance of blood and body horror they'd allow. After that, we have Sigma, who I'm like 90% certain is in the game. Actually, I'm 100% certain Sigma is in the game in some form. Playable-wise, separately from Ultron Sigma, we'll have to see. But, I could see him being the one with elaborate animations, and the reason for that is Sigma likes to transform. He has many forms in every game that he's in, which is pretty much every Mega Man X game. he goes from being the normal size him to, once he dies, he turns into a big scary robot monster. And I could see that being part of the elaborate animations of him transforming into a giant head in the background for level 3 super or something along those lines. And I could see him being the option. I mean, I'm sure he's in the game. However, I don't know if he himself is the character. However, that'd be 2 potentially confirmed villains, which is pretty cool. Alright, now we're starting to get into slightly more obscure stuff, so one that actually kind of jumped out to me would be a monster from Monster Hunter, because, you know, all these human fighters would have pretty normal movesets, but all of a sudden you get an animal fighter, say like Amateras from Marvel 3, and then things start to get a bit different. So I just put up a picture of Zinogre from Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, which is kind of a staple monster. A lot of people know and recognize it, but really any monster could be on this list here, and I do think there's a chance, and you could argue they're villains because, well, you fight them. They are the primary and only antagonists of the Monster Hunter series. Plus, that would get around the whole issue they had of, you know, they want to put Monster Hunter reps in the game, but the Monster Hunter team doesn't want to design like a main character or hunter because everyone's supposed to be separate. So I feel like that would represent easily Capcom's biggest franchise. I mean, oh my god, those sales in Japan, without necessarily compromising them not being a hunter. I don't know if this counts as a villain, but I could see the guy's internal thoughts saying like, yeah, they're kind of like villains. Alright, then after that, we have from Breath of Fire 4, a character who was actually considered for Marvel 3, and I am so infinitely sad he's not in. It is Fo Lu, the villain of Breath of Fire 4, who is the evil counterpart of the main character Ryu, who probably won't be in for naming reasons. If they were to put in a character from Breath of Fire, it would be Nina, because you don't want 2 Ryus. And potentially Ryuichi, who is also Ryu. It's Phoenix, right? In terms of elaborate animations, this again goes into this idea of transformations. The Breath of Fire characters, well, the main ones at least, Ryu and in this case Fo Lu also, have the ability to transform into dragons. And of course, and not only that, they could do half forms. They could do hybrid human dragon forms, kind of like Krauser. So I could see that being an idea of an elaborate animation where it's very much this, you know, it's a character who will come out, and as you're fighting, you know, you get to level 1, and maybe it'll automatically activate their dragon trigger or whatever, and hybrid form, and, you know, it has the animation, and it's kind of cool because in the game, when you activate it, there's a big column of fire that goes up, and by doing that, you know, that could be part of an attack that leads into this transformed state. I could feel like that could go into some elaborate animations, especially when you get into, for example, a level 3 super, which will be like the Kaiser Dragon's Kaiser attack or whatever, which is a huge like summon almost in the game, which could then just be an animation for an attack. So I feel that'd be a very interesting idea for a character. And then finally, just going really out there, and I mean I'm talking really out there, we have from Asura's Wrath, the villain of Chakravartin, who is like this god of infinite hands, looks like the Buddha, and like is the most powerful character. I think it would be really cool. He's kind of like Thanos level. I mean, of course, Asura beats him in the end, so, you know, you could argue that Asura is Thanos level, but you want elaborate animations, just put in a character with an infinite number of hands, and it's like Robin from One Piece, you know? That one's really stretching. I just looked up Capcom Villains on Google, and it gave me a list, and I said, yep, that's one who's elaborate. But now we're gonna go on to the series, which, wait, no, I forgot one. Never mind. Finally, we have from Sengoku Basara, also known as Devil Kings when it was initially brought over here, Oda Nobunaga, the Devil King himself. And in terms of how this could be an elaborate character, he does have a cape, so some cool cape animations, along with the fact that he can summon a giant evil version of himself, like a stand behind him. So I feel like there could be some cool stuff with that. However, again, this was a case of I'm really reaching. Capcom doesn't have that many, like, villains to put in, surprisingly, aside from the obvious ones. Alright, now we're moving on to the one that will take up the majority of this video, and that is Darkstalkers, because Darkstalkers, all the characters are kind of good and kind of bad, you know? It's like, you can't really say they're all good, you know? For example, the main character is Dimitri, except, you know, Dimitri is not necessarily a villain, but is listed as a villain on the wiki, and it's like, oh, it's kind of complicated, but there's a lot of characters who could come from Darkstalkers who could be in, and we're going to go from the list of the least plausible for this list to the most. Alright, so, first off, we have Anarchus, is that how you pronounce it? Anacharis? The mummy guy, and he's the lowest on the list right now, because honestly, I don't think he'll be in. He was in Marvel 2, however, he's not a visually interesting character, nor do I think he has many fans, and we've seen him before. He's been in a Marvel game, a hyper fighting game, and it's Anarchus, you know, it's like, it's eh. After that, we actually have, now this is really obscure, actually I could have probably put this one lower, we have D, the evil form of Donovan from Darkstalkers, the updated re-release on PS2 and PSP. This one is very clearly a villain, because you could argue Dimitri or Donovan are, you know, heroes, but this would give you basically Donovan and Dimitri in a single package, and you could just have them both, and even have costumes for each other or something. But he's listed as a villain. I remember hearing about him when I was kind of getting into Darkstalkers. I'm like, wow, that's an obscure character. After that, we have QB, Queen B. She is, you know, a villain, and she has some crazy, I mean, all the Darkstalkers characters have amazing animation using the stretch and squish and pull animation styles. So really, any of them could be in, and I get, be in? But I feel like QB would have issues again a bit with being a little too suggestive and mature for a Marvel game. Mind you, you do have Morgan in there, but I feel like QB would be pushing it a little too far. After that, we have Lord Raptor. Now, if there is a Darkstalkers character that I personally really want in, it is Lord Raptor. He is crazy, but also he is like from the cartoon series. He has a rap that is terrible, and I love him. Please watch the Darkstalkers TV series. It is one of the most amazing pieces of fighting game history. But his animations are crazy. He has an attack where he turns you into a basketball and dunks you. He's nuts. He would be the perfect fit. However, I almost feel like he might not be popular enough compared to some of the other characters. Lord Raptor has like many fans, but in terms of the grand scheme of Capcom Villains, maybe not as many. After that, we have Jeddah, who is kind of the main villain of, well, he is the main villain of Darkstalkers 3. He has insane animations. He is a Capcom villain. I think he's been a villain in more crossover RPGs than most other Capcom villains. Like, he is always brought back as a villain because he's crazy. However, this gets into an issue of his fighting style, which is self-mutilation weaponized. So he will cut off his head, and his head will fall, and blood will splurt out at you, and that damages you. Might not go very well for Marvel, I feel, unless they were to totally change his moveset around into something different. He has an inflation move, which goes gross. There's a lot of stuff. So, as awesome as Jeddah would be, he kind of is a little too grotesque for Marvel. Now, finally, we have the character who I'm pretty sure it's going to be, because when you want to talk elaborate animations, how about a character who is always on fire? We have Pyron, the villain of Darkstalkers 2, I'm pretty sure? I'm not sure. I have always played just Darkstalkers 3. But he's like an alien dude, always on fire, and that's such a way to get easy, elaborate animations. He would fit with the Marvel cast very well, and would kind of show up Killer Instinct Cinder in a very, you know, explicit way of, hey, look, you can do a guy all on fire? Well, we can too, and make him look better. So I do feel like Pyron has a good chance of being in. He would certainly fit with the universe, the story, the gameplay. Pyron, I feel, is the choice it's going to be. However, I would like to be surprised and get one of the other ones on the list, so we'll have to see. Thank you all for watching my video on Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite's new thing about it's going to be a Capcom villain who with elaborate animations. If you like this and would like to see more, leave likes and comments. I'd love to read comments on Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. It is a big big favorite of mine. So, and if you'd like to see more, be sure to tell me, because hey, I am always talking about new Marvel vs. Capcom games. It is my favorite game series. So we'll see what happens next time as more news comes out. So thank you all for watching. See you guys later. Ciao.